Welcome to the President and CEO Focus on the Middle Market podcast series, where President and CEO founder Paul Stukel discusses middle market issues with business leaders from across the nation. Today, in part 2 of a 4-part series, Paul speaks with Irwin Goverman, principal at Deloitte Consulting Services, about the increased aggressiveness of middle market companies in adopting new technologies as means to create competitive advantage.
You know, what's interesting to me is, looking at the whole picture together, there's this confluence of technology, and again related to business needs, but there's this sort of magical moment that seems to have happened here, where you've got at least 3 and perhaps more major issues happening at the same time that are all self-reinforcing, because you've got the cloud, which is, as you said, reducing barriers to entry big time. In terms of costs and time to market and all that kind of good stuff. You've got, again, the big data side of things. So there's a lot of data that can be crunched using the cloud. And then there's, of course, the mobile/social networking bit, which provides more and more data, and access. There's just this extraordinary confluence of events that which kind of helps you make sense of what you're getting here in your report. Part of me wonders if it's not surprising that the percentage of folks that consider this to be technology to be a competitive advantage, it shouldn't be higher. What do you think about that?
Well, I think, again, for mid-market companies, you look at the model of the larger companies like the Procters and Gambles and whatnot. They've done this for years, right? They've looked at large pieces of external data, or big data, if you want to call it that. And the fact that, just as you've said, you're 100% right, that the technology in terms of the cloud providing a means to gather the data, to use the data, to make sense of the data and manipulate it is unprecedented. There are still some barriers to entry, which is really the marketing department or the human resources department understanding really what it wants out of the big data. So it may not be a technological barrier, but there's still a barrier to some extent of understanding exactly which pieces of the big data you want to access and what your objectives are in looking at it. So I think it's going to be a continuing trend that we'll see more and more of this. But there is somewhat of a hesitance, or not hesitance, but a learning curve in terms of what to do with that data. So the technology is there. The adoption is somewhat slower, and that adoption is slower perhaps because there isn't yet a perceived business need universally, or that business need continues to compete, especially with mid-market companies, with other needs that go on at the same time. Basic investments in capital structure or human resources or marketing spend, things like that.
There's sort of changing topics a little bit. There's this buzzword that's going around, or has been going around for quite a while, actually, meaning collaboration between companies, right, as opposed to sort of silo by silo, where everyone's defensive. You're a vendor and I'm your customer, and so I'm not going to show you anything. I'm just going to tell you what I want, to the more collaborative, and again, technology sort of facilitating that. We share a lot more information, particularly, and I'm particularly intrigued in things like supply chain and manufacturing. Are you seeing more and more of those type of technologies being implemented to sort of further this kind of open, more open way of doing business with your sort of ecosystem?
We see quite a bit of that, actually. I happen to practice, as well as in mid-market, I practice in life sciences, where that kind of collaboration, both in supply chain and in serving patients and physicians, has been going on for some time. The barrier there probably has not been so much technological as a set of standards for how you interpret and use that data. So we're seeing more adoption in supply chain, going back, frankly, to the just-in-time and Kanban type supply chain and manufacturing that we saw years ago. But now it's on steroids, if you will.
Yeah.
What we call B2B and B2C collaboration, business to business and business to consumer, it has, just as you said, skyrocketed. Again, we're around a set of standards so that people really know what data they're interchanging. Of course, there are still the constraints of security and of antitrust and other regulatory ring fences that you've got to take into account.
Check back tomorrow for part 3 of our discussion with Irwin. Thanks for listening.